I'm Carmel Corrigan, and as I was introduced, I'm Head of Participation and Rights Education in the Ombudsman for Children's Office. And I'd just like to start, if I could, because I don't know how familiar people are with the office, so maybe just a very small bit about kind of where we came from and who we are. I'm sure that some of you know that it's 25 years since we signed and ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And in signing up to that convention, what we did is, as a country and as a state, we made a commitment under international law to protect and uphold and achieve the rights of children. Part of what you do when you ratify the UNCRC is you sign up to be examined and monitored on a regular basis by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. And when the committee examines you, it then makes concluding observations and recommendations. And our first examination concluded in 1998. And one of the things they recommended was that Ireland establish an independent statutory body that would monitor and protect and seek to uphold the rights of children. And that's where we came from. It was that recommendation that led to the Ombudsman for Children's Act in 2002, and the office opened its doors in 2004. So this is a direct result of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So our remit is rights. It is children's rights. And everything we do is within the context of children's rights. We're an independent body, we're a statutory body, we have an act that governs what we do. We don't answer to any government department, we answer only to the Oireachtas. Where the Ombudsman as an office holder is appointed directly by the President, and I'm sure a lot of you know and remember that the first Ombudsman was Emily Logan, and the current Ombudsman now is Dr. Niall Muldoon. And he was appointed by President Higgins in 2015. And one of the things that we do with children, sometimes just as a little test to see if they're paying attention when we're talking to them sometimes, is we say, I don't know if you can see the photograph or see the slide because the lights are up. So can you see the slide at all? Yeah. We ask the children, which is Niall and which is Michael? And sometimes they get it right. I need to go back. Previous. Okay. So this is just for me to talk very, very quickly about what the OCO does, because I'm going to talk about one bit of what we do. But just for people who don't know, we have two functions, which is quite simple in legislative terms. We have two functions. One of them is to promote children's rights and to promote the awareness of children's rights. And we do that in lots of ways. We give advice on legislation, we give advice on policy, we consult with children, we deliver education to children and adults. So there's lots of ways in which we do that, and what I do fits under that piece. The second piece that we do, which is actually often the piece that a lot more people are interested in than the promotion of rights, is we have a complaints handling function. So we can examine or investigate complaints that are brought either by children or on behalf of children against mostly public bodies, so government departments, government agencies, like the HSE, like TUSLA. We can examine schools, and we can examine voluntary hospitals. And recently our remit's been extended, and we can examine now non-public bodies if they're under major funding from the government. So basically, if you're a voluntary organisation and you have a contract from the government to deliver a service for them, you're now examinable by us as well. We have to have two things when we look at complaints. One, it has to be administrative action. So we can't examine professional conduct. So for the teachers in the room, we get lots of complaints about schools. It's the biggest category of complaints that we get, is about schools and about education. And that's not surprising. Children spend 6, 7, 8 hours a day in schools for most of the year. That's not surprising. But we get a lot that we can't actually look at, because they tend to be about individual teachers, teaching practice, professional behaviour, and they're not within our remit. But the administration is. So for all the parents in the audience who are now thinking, I might think about that on Monday morning. I won't be telling the complaints officers why the phones are ringing, okay? We were posed a very interesting question this morning several times, which is, why should we listen to children? There are loads of reasons why we should listen to children. There are lots of them as far as I'm concerned. They're interesting, they're insightful, they're humans. They have as much right to speak as I do, as you do. They have as much right to be listened to. But one of the key reasons that we should listen to children is that it is a right. And under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 12 says the child has the right to express a view and to have that view heard. But the second part of Article 12 is just as important, which is that we not just have to listen to them. We don't just have to bring them in and say, well, what do you think about your school? Or what do you think about your school uniform? Or where would you like to go on your school trip? They have the right to have their views given due consideration and taken seriously. So it has to move away, and we're constantly working to move away from the, oh yeah, we listened to children, yeah, it was lovely, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no, we went off and did what we wanted anyway. They have to be considered. That's the second part of the right. But giving children the opportunity to express their view on things that affect them is actually a right, and we've signed up to uphold that. So for me, that's one of the key reasons as to why we should be listening to children. I keep doing this, I keep double clicking. In all of my wonderful achievements, you'll know if you look at the biography, there's nothing in there but IT skills. Nothing, okay? So when Anya contacted me to talk today, she asked me to talk about a particular issue, which is how children's views affect our work in the office. As an organisation, how does hearing from children impact on our work? So we primarily hear from children in 3 different ways. The first of them is through complaints. And again, that's not unsurprising, because we're talking about administration, we're talking about formal procedures, and a lot of the time we are actually talking about very young children that we get complaints about. So we don't get an awful lot from children, but we get a lot from parents. But when we get a complaint, it is part of our remit that we seek the child's view on the complaint that was made. So we hear from children that way, and that's usually one-to-one. It's a particular way of hearing what the child has to say. We also run, and I'm sure many people are aware here too, we run free education and rights awareness raising workshops for children, usually through their schools or through youth groups, etc. And so we see in the office, we see somewhere maybe between 40 and 50 school groups a year that come into us, and we talk them through what rights are, what their particular rights are, and we get them to work through activities that raises their own awareness of what their rights might be. But part of those workshops is that we ask the children at the end always to write, as in handwrite, in case anybody thinks we're giving kids out mobile phones and asking them to tweet. We're not. We get them to handwrite a tweet of an issue that they think the Ombudsman should be aware of or should deal with that's important to them. And you'd be amazed at some of the stuff that comes in that very straightforward way. And that's another way of just capturing their views and capturing their voices. And the third way then is through planned consultations. And these are consultations that we hold on particular issues. with children and young people. So we've held quite a lot of these. Going to talk about one or two of them just very soon in terms of how they impact and where they came from. But we've held quite a lot of this. We've held consultations with children and young people on issues like mental health and mental health services, separated children or unaccompanied minors, Brexit, which we did last year, children's experiences of being homeless and homelessness, and children's experience of detention, and in particular detention in adult prisons, which thankfully we've ceased. Happy days. But they're the three main ways that we get kind of views from children, that we talk to them. They're very different, and we get quite different information and results from them. How talking to children impact on our work. And when I was thinking about this, I kind of thought there's no better place to start really than at the top, or so Niall would like to think. That this is at the top, because it's the appointment of the Ombudsman. So when Niall was appointed Ombudsman, one of the key things that happened, and it happened with Emily as well, is that children had to have a say in who the Ombudsman was. And this is a long process, it's a long recruitment process. So the way this started is the Department of Children and Youth Affairs brought together a working group of 30 young people aged from 7 to 17. And what they did was they brainstormed about the kind of person they wanted the Ombudsman to be. And they brainstormed this. So this is kind of one of the results of that brainstorming. So you can see lots of words up here that came from children. So they want someone that's committed, they want someone who's passionate, they want someone who's honest. But one of the key ones on here is they want somebody who values children's opinions. And this is actually a photograph of a 10 by 8 foot board that sits in the lobby of our office, and a copy of which also sits in that size in Niall's office, as a constant reminder to us of what children want, not just from Niall, but from the office. Once this was done, there was then a group of 17 of those 30 children who volunteered for it, brought together. And the reason for that was because when the department who was managing the recruitment process got down to the last 5 candidates, they wanted children's input on who then was appointed. So they brought those 17 children together, and all of the candidates were told, you are going here on this date to meet with a group of children to do a role play. And that's all the information they got. So they didn't know what the role play was on, they didn't know anything else, just that was it. So when they went into the room, they were actually faced with a group of 17 children, again, all of them aged 7 to 17, 4 of whom stood up with real complaints, real issues that were real to them, to their lives. And each candidate had to answer each of those complaints about how they would deal with it, what they would do, what they would hope to achieve. And when that exercise was finished, that exercise actually counted for 50% of the weighting of the final candidate. So this wasn't a tokenistic exercise. This was half of your marks in the recruitment campaign. And the final bit of this is that, and I'm not sure whether candidates were aware of this or not, but when they walked into the formal interview panel, there was 2 children sitting on it. And they were interviewed by 2 children alongside the adults. And they were questioned by the children alongside the adults. And their views carried equal weight in the decision as to who was eventually appointed. So from the very beginning of this, and this was exactly the same process that went on in 2004 before Emily Logan was appointed, from the very beginning, the head of this office is driven by listening to what children want. And it's a key piece. It embeds that piece in our work. So, I want to just talk about two pieces of work that we've done in what I call the fun part of the office, which is participation and rights education. And it's just two examples of how we do work with children, how we listen and where it comes from. An awful lot of what we do in terms of participation and consultation is informed by children. But these are just two examples. And the first one is a topic that Anya touched on this morning, and also a topic that I know will be close to the hearts of many people in this room, which is bullying. And we produced a report called Dealing with Bullying in Schools, a consultation with children and young people. And maybe, Paul, if you wouldn't mind, there's a copy in that purple folder. I just want to have a physical copy of it. Sorry about this. The first thing about this project, really, about the voices of children, is where did the project come from? Why did we decide on bullying? Because bullying has been an issue that's been going around for a long time. So why did we decide to take this particular one? Because it's not the only issue that comes to our attention, and it's not the only issue that's going on for children and young people. But in the awareness-raising workshops that we hold, what we found over a period of time was that bullying was just coming up as an issue again and again and again and again in those handwritten tweets. It was a real concern for children of all ages, and our workshops are open to children from junior infants to 6th year in secondary school, and we were getting this right across the board. Bullying, 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 but a particular aspect of bullying, which was how the school dealt with it. It wasn't about parents, it wasn't about services, it was about the school. How was the school dealing with bullying? And the other thing is that we were getting an increasing number of complaints on behalf of children who were experiencing bullying. So this project from the beginning was driven by those concerns expressed by and on behalf of children. So we decided to do this project, and what we did was we held workshops around the country with children, primary and secondary. We consulted with over 300 children, and we eventually published this report, which I just want to show you for one reason. It's very often when children say something, it's written in adult speak. We translate it into adult language because we're writing for a particular audience. We're writing for an adult audience. And that's fine. I personally think that's fine. If you're trying to influence adults, sometimes you have to do that. But what I really like in this, and we do this more and more, is this. I don't know if you can actually see this, right? Those are the actual words that children wrote. And they're included right throughout this report. We go again. There's several of these in this report, and what people tell us is that the report is great, thanks very much, but this is what they remember. These are the pieces they remember because they're children's words. And nobody gets across how a child feels or what a child wants better than a child. One of the things that we really liked about this is that it was directed, this was particularly aimed at schools because that was the children's concern. But what we found was that very shortly after this, the department had already been working on their own bullying guidelines and anti-bullying guidelines, but we can actually see some of what the children said being reflected in those guidelines. One key thing being that you need to talk to pupils if you're developing an anti-bullying policy. And that is well and truly in here, believe me, but it's also part of the department's guidelines. So not only did what children tell us they wanted to talk about, and then how they talked about it influence this and us and schools, but it also influenced national procedures. So I think that's, again, that's the value, because it's coming from them. Am I okay? Okay, I won't be long. I'll talk very quickly about tune in, if that's okay. One of the things that we find listening to children is you have people who are very, very happy to listen to children, very proactive about listening to children. But when you go to try and influence upwards then, decision makers, policy makers, you know, the Department of Education, the Board of Management, whatever, it can be hard to get that influence upwards. But the one thing you can influence is what you do in your own organisation, in your own home, your own life, your own school, or you can influence that. So one of the things that we absolutely have influence over is what we do as an office. And one of the things we do, as I said, is promote children's rights. But we decided in 2016, okay, we've been doing all this stuff for ages, but we, in a certain way, but really, is this what children and young people want from us in terms of rights? So we launched Tune In, which was a consultation with children and young people through their schools, primary and secondary, through their youth groups, and resulted in over 2,000 children taking part in this consultation across the country on rights awareness. And basically what we said, who do you want to tell you about your rights? Where do you want to get the information? What kind of information do you want, and how do you want it? And we sent out support materials to schools and youth groups to help them do this consultation in their schools. So they told us in no uncertain terms that where, parents are a big one, but really they want it in schools, they want it on social media, and they want it on websites. They want parents and teachers, they're the two main sources that they have for all information, and they want it through videos, and they want speakers going out. They want new people telling them. So in terms of impact, seriously, IT is not my gig, because there's no point asking them if you're not going to do anything. So we got all this information in, and then it's a question, what did we do as an organisation? What did we do to meet their needs? So one of the things we did was we launched It's Your Right, which is a website dedicated to children and children's rights. It's where children can go to get information across a load of levels specifically about their rights, and it's designed specifically for children and young people. They said they wanted videos. We launched 2 new videos on children's stories about not having and getting their rights. They wanted teachers to educate them. So we launched last year a whole new set of online educational resources. For any of the teachers in the room, they're on the website. They cover every year from junior infants to 6th year. They're all downloadable. They're class activities, class plans, everything else in relation to children's rights. They wanted people going out to talk to them, so we've consciously increased the amount of outreach work we do, going to schools, going to youth groups, going out of the office to meet with them. And they wanted increased social media. So we now have upped all of our usage in relation to the usual social media platforms of Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, mainly aimed at, that piece of it is mainly aimed at, obviously, at the older age groups. It's not aimed at the younger age groups. So, this is just very quickly, I also said I would talk very quickly about lessons learned. Some of these are organisational, some of these are actually organisational, some of them are personal. Is that I started out doing this kind of work roughly 17 years ago. So when talking to children was not really on an awful lot of people's agendas. And for me, starting out personally, you were going, how, like, I wasn't used to doing this. How am I going to do this? You know, and will they, you know, and you question, are children going to be able to tell you anything? You're a bit uncomfortable with it. The one thing that we've learned as an organisation, and I've learned personally, is that children have an absolute ability and desire to tell you things, to talk to you, to give you a view. They're hungry for it. They want it, and they absolutely will respect you for doing it. The second thing is, you can't walk into a room with a blank sheet of paper and say to children, give me an answer to that. They need support. They need you to engage in a good, positive way in order to allow them expressive view. They need information. They need scaffolding. So it's not a case of just opening the door to a group of children and saying, so then, right, tell me. You can't do it as an adult. Why would we expect children to do it? Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes you get the question right, sometimes you get the question wrong. If you get the question wrong, think of a different question. Or think of a different way of asking the same question. Or a different way of getting the answer. But don't stop trying just because it doesn't work the first time. And the last one is give it time. Give yourself time to do it, and give them time to think, to respond. Again, this morning we talked about not interrupting, not rushing, not finishing sentences. Give them time to think and respond. They're for me, and I think organisationally, key things. This is my last slide on you. It's only 30 seconds. This is 30 seconds, if it plays. This is, I have to say, I apologise in advance. This is children's scene, but it's children's scene being heard. I'm going to finish there, but I am going to finish on this sentence, which is what we hear from children at the end of virtually every rights awareness session or every consultation, which is thanks for listening.